everybody. This is Dee Dee with Hearts Connected. It is right at 1 o'clock, but we're expecting quite a few other people. So if you will just hang tight with us, we're going to give ourselves a few more minutes to get some other participants in.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of you are not on mute, so you may just want to check your settings. Thank you. For those of you who just joined in, we're giving some other people a few minutes to log on, and then we'll get started. One more minute, and then we will get started. I know a lot of y'all are working and doing this during your lunch breaks, so we want to give everybody an opportunity to log in. Okay, I think we're going to get started. We have quite a few people who've registered that haven't joined us yet, but I don't want those of you who are on time, I certainly don't want to hold back. So I'm going to start with introduction. So I am Dee Dee Fritsch. I am the founder and president of Hearts Connected. I am not sure how many of you have joined us before, but if you haven't joined us before, I want to tell you just a little bit about Hearts Connected. And then we're going to do a quick poll, and then we're going to introduce our speaker for today and let her get started. So Hearts Connected is a community-based child life company that we have been around for a little bit over 2 years now. We serve all of the United States, and we are completely virtual. So we are here to support you and referrals that you send to us so that we can help you with your patients outside the hospital walls when you can't be there. If you want to send us a referral, we are there for you. Also, if you've got friends and family who aren't using you and they need additional services, please feel free to think about us. But we have about 6 child life specialists that work for us, and we are growing rapidly. And one of the things that we do is offer this webinar every other month. It's really important to me to support the industry and to support child life, and I want to give back to y'all. So we offer this to you every other month. And the majority of what we've been talking about for the past year is really about self-care. And this is our second time talking about resilience today. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to actually start with a poll. Alice is here with us. She is not on video, but she is here with us as well. She is my operations manager, and she's going to throw up a poll. So if those of you who are on a computer can participate, that would be great. Alice, I'm not seeing it on my screen. I don't know if others are.
Yeah, so far about 11 out of 21 people on here have responded. So I'll just wait a little bit longer.
Sorry, y'all. We are, because both of us are, Alice and I both are logged into the same account, so I can't always see the same thing.
Okay, I'm going to share the poll now. So for the first question, we had, to me, self-care is, and the most common answer was difficult to maintain at 67%. Actually, it was an equal split, difficult to maintain and necessary at 67%. And then as important as my other daily responsibilities was next, as well as hard to do in a luxury. But everyone agreed that it's necessary for self-care, so that's really great. And then the second question, when I engage in self-care, I feel, the most common answer was rejuvenated, and then relaxed, and then liberated, guilty, worthy, and then lazy, but nobody thought weak or unfocused or important. And then on a scale of 1 to 10, how well do you feel you're taking care of your body and your mental wellness? It seems like people are landing around 6, so 5, 6, 7. A couple people are at 2 and 3, and a couple people are at 8. It's kind of in the mid-range today.
Interesting. Well, perfect timing for this talk. So thank you, Alice, for facilitating that for us. So today we have Michelle Dickinson. We connected with her several months ago and just got so excited talking to her. You will thoroughly enjoy her. Give you a little bit about her. She is a passionate workplace mental health strategist, resilience coach, TED speaker, and a published author of her memoir, Breaking Into My Life. After years of playing the role of child caregiver to her sick mother, Michelle embarked on her own healing journey of self-discovery. Her memoir offers a rare glimpse into a young girl's experience living with and loving her bipolar mother. Michelle spent years working to eradicate the mental health stigma within her own workplace by elevating compassion, causing more open conversations, and leading real change in how mental illness is understood in the workplace. She also knows firsthand what it's like to struggle with a mental illness after experiencing her own depression due to a challenging divorce. In 2019, Michelle concluded her 19-year pharmaceutical career and embarked on a path to positively impact the mental health landscape with a goal of reaching 10,000 lives in her work in 2022. So, Michelle, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm going to go off of video, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Dee Dee. I am so excited to be here. And it is so great to have this opportunity to talk to you all. I was so inspired by those results from the poll. It tells me that you understand the importance of resilience, the importance of well-being. So hopefully today, with what I share with you, it'll just re-cement the importance of it. So just just a nod to May, Mental Health Awareness Month. We have an opportunity every year, the month of May, to turn up the volume around emotional well-being and mental health, and really highlight that there is no health without mental health. And together we can remove stigma that really has too many people suffer in silence. So a great opportunity. So what I'm going to cover with you today are a few things. First, I want to share with you my story, the 3 ways that I've personally been touched by mental illness. Then a little bit about why we need to do our part to banish the shame and fear around mental illness. I'm going to share some ways to boost our resilience, small, tangible, daily things we can do. And then I have a message for caregivers, the people that care for everyone else. I played that role, caring for my mom on a different level, but I have some important information I want to share there. And then I have a challenge that I'll leave you all with if you are up for the challenge. So first, a little bit about me. I grew up with a mom who had bipolar disorder, and it was a very uncertain experience. I would come home from school and I would put my hand on the doorknob to go in, and I never knew the mom I was going to meet on the other side. My mom, traditional bipolar disorder, rapid cycling, manic highs, deep depressing lows. It was very challenging, and the whole experience would shape me. My mom, when you have a parent who has a mental illness, it can be incredibly draining. And as a little child, the one thing we need is stability, but I really didn't have that. It took a lot of emotional and mental energy to just sort of prepare myself for the mom that I was going to get. And so that experience really was what started to shape me and help me understand mental illness a little bit, and the gravity in which it affects people and their lives. I equate it to a roller coaster. Having a mom with bipolar disorder, there's a lot of highs and lows. The way I explain it is, going up the ramp, my mom was pretty much the controlling mom, had her hand in everything. I was always being watched. She would get to the top of the roller coaster and she'd hit her manic period, her mania. And that was a lot like Disney, like she was a pleasure to be around. There wasn't anything I could do wrong. She was in her very, very creative space. And that would also be followed by her deep, depressing lows, which were incredibly challenging, because there's nothing really you can do to console someone who is in a depression like that. And watching them suffer is extremely challenging. But that was my normal, and I didn't know any better. I didn't know any different. I learned to adapt. I learned to find in other parental figures and adults like my aunt and my grandmother, I would find what I needed ultimately to help me navigate. And I think, kids are very resourceful when they need to be. And so I would do what I have to help me navigate through the rough spots, basically. Fast forward, and out of determination, I pulled myself up on my bootstraps. I went from an uneducated secretary to an associate director with a master's degree, something I'm pretty proud of, because I got my education later in life, and it was something that really gave me confidence. The accomplishment of achieving that gave me the confidence to really move forward into the direction of my dreams. What is it that I really wanted? And then in 2013, I was invited to give a TED Talk and tell the story of my mom. And, you know, having a parent with a mental illness is extremely embarrassing. So it was not something that I spoke about. I didn't want people to know about the story of my mom, but I found myself telling a colleague, and then before I knew it, I was invited to give this talk. So for the very first time, I stood on the big red dot, gave a TED Talk, told the story of my mom. It was exhilarating. It was terrifying. It was all those things wrapped up into one. But the reaction that I got from telling that story courageously, you know, going there and really opening up the conversation, that is what gave me the confidence and had me find my voice. And the confidence would then help me to spend the next 4 years writing my memoir, breaking into my life. And so that journey was interesting. It was very cathartic to relive those experiences. My goal with the book was I want to humanize mental health and mental illness for the person that has no relationship to it, hasn't been personally affected. And in order to do that, you have to take a reader on a journey with you. And if you want to take a reader on a journey, you have to vividly recall those experiences that were somewhat painful for me. So I did that, and I wrote the book and released the book in 2018, and found myself, you know, on this book tour telling everybody about, you know, the story of my mom, celebrating her life, celebrating what I learned from that experience, but most importantly, humanizing mental health. I mean, that was my goal. So I had the privilege to really open up conversations that weren't going to happen with the book as a vehicle to do that. Back at my organization, I was working still in the corporate space. I was also a leader to help build the fastest growing mental health employee resource group. And so that was very, very important to me because I really wanted to create more compassion and understanding at work. And so I took the opportunity to do that and played a very significant role in creating that ERG. But then, as life would have it, I had always looked at mental illness as something over there that my mom had, but that I never had experienced myself. I was adopted, so I maybe thought in my mind I wouldn't be affected like by a mental illness because my mom was not my biological mom. But what happened was life came along, and I found myself going through a really dark period, going through a divorce. I'm 46 years old, and I'm getting diagnosed with depression. And so that just reminded me that nobody is immune to mental illness. And at any point in your life, this can happen where, you know, life can come at you and take you down. So that was a very interesting experience to finally get a little bit of the world that my mom lived in, having this chronic illness. Now, mine was not chronic, it was temporary, but it gave me a very interesting perspective about mental health and an appreciation for how hard it is to function with a mental illness. But that also had me realize that we need more compassion in the world for people who are suffering. Because even though I was working in an organization that made mental health a priority, we still had leaders that didn't get it. And when I say that, I mean, I actually disclosed to my boss that I was diagnosed with depression. And 6 months later, she said to me, you know, you didn't meet expectations. You didn't bring your bubbly, upbeat self to work every day. And that was a turning point for me because the way I felt being judged by my bubbliness after disclosing that I was struggling with depression just made me really passionate that we needed to do more, and leaders need to understand, and people need to extend to people more compassion. And if this was happening to me, how many other people and how many other workplaces was this happening to? So that was a gift in many ways because it lit a fire within me. And so after 19 years being in the pharmaceutical industry, I left and decided to start my company, Trifecta Mental Health. I wanted to be part of the solution. I didn't want to just talk about it anymore. I wanted to be part of the solution and to make brain health a normal conversation. The brain is just another organ. So the work I get to do now is I work with organizations to bring compassion, understanding, resilience, leaders trainings to organizations so we can lead people, we can lead better and do better. Because my why is ultimately that we are talking about the brain like it is any other organ, that we're not ignoring it, that we're not stepping over it, that people don't have to put their game face on and go to work and pretend they're okay, and that people don't suffer in silence, because at the end of the day, it's not right. But I think the first thing we have to do is we have to stop and recognize our language around mental health. I personally started to call it emotional well-being because it feels more acceptable to say emotional well-being than mental health. We still have a stigma around mental in general. So language is so important. So emotional well-being seems a little bit more inviting, if you will, when we talk about mental health. But also moving away from you are mentally ill or you are mentally well, because in reality, there's this continuum for mental health, right? We glide across a continuum. Life comes along, knocks us down. We might be further down the continuum. So I think it's important that we just stop relating to it as well or sick. We all have emotional well-being that is at different stages given different points in our lives. There's really no embarrassment or shame. There should be none around brain health. You wouldn't ignore a broken arm. You wouldn't ignore a broken leg. You would get support. You wouldn't step over it or pretend it wasn't happening. And I think the good news we need to recognize is that COVID has shined a light on this. And through all of the conversations around lockdown, the good news is I think that we're moving in the right direction because we are talking more about it, the impact that the pandemic has had on people's emotional well-being. But I think that there's some serious work to be done still. And it starts with each and every one of us at the end of the day. People often ask me, you know what, Michelle, I don't understand how do I become more resilient? How do you stay so positive? And I get this from the clients that I coach all the time. They just want to be more positive. And I say to them, it's not like willpower is going to do it on its own. There are specific things that can help you. One of the things that I've learned along the way, because I didn't just arrive at this, it took a journey to unpack my childhood. I did years of clinical therapy. I did years of self-discovery work. And the one common denominator that I have always realized, that I've come to realize, is the power of self-awareness, the power of really knowing yourself, connecting to yourself. That is so important if you want to elevate the quality of your well-being overall. And so how do we do that? Well, first and foremost, we have to be getting present to how we're feeling every day. Feeling and understanding how we're feeling every day is the first step in preserving our emotional well-being. So, we wake up in the morning and the body part we may have worked out a little too hard last night screams for attention, right? Give me some pain relief or stretch a little bit. But do we do that with our emotional well-being? I would say not. And that's where I want to invite you to really start to do the self-audit like every morning. Get present to how you're feeling. It's so important to get present to how you're feeling so that you can do something when you start to not feel so good, which ultimately, you're not going to slide further into feeling worse. If you can acknowledge it, you can do something about it. So right now, I'd like to invite you all to just look at this chart. And in this present moment, at this time, not earlier today, not yesterday, not last night, identify which heart do you feel right now? And just get present to that. And so the thing that is so important is that, if you are, say, the green heart or the blue heart, if you acknowledge that, then you can actually say to yourself, wow, I'm really not doing as great as I'd like to be doing, or I'm not feeling as joyful as I'd like to feel. You have the opportunity to do something when you get present to it. When we busy ourselves into our day and we worry about everybody else around us, and we're worrying about work, and we're worrying about our families, and we're ignoring ourselves, that's when we get into trouble. So it's really the power of really reflecting and knowing how you're doing. And then the next step is to know what you need to do for you before it escalates. It's about, what is it that works for you that can help you? What's in your toolbox? For some people, it's, I know I have to get to the gym. I know I have to pick up the phone and call my best friend and just have a really good talk. I know I have to get outside and get some fresh air and sunshine. Whatever it is, you need to know what you can do for you and make it a priority before you feel worse. So that's the first thing, is understanding what's in your toolbox. And two things that I find incredibly helpful for me that I do every day as a preventative is I take 30 minutes every morning for myself. I get up a half an hour earlier before my day starts, and I get up and I do two things. I do gratitude and I do meditation. And those two things actually help me get my mind straight, because there are days when I wake up in the morning and my mind immediately is going to all the things that are wrong, all the things that I'm upset about, all the things that went wrong yesterday, all the worries that I have for today. And I know the one way that I get myself back on center is to sit down, to look at my little app that is the 5-minute journal, log 3 things that are good, and then get right into a 15-minute meditation. And the meditation is the powerful part, because if you want to show up in the world grounded, have a clear mind, be ready to focus, meditation is one of the most powerful ways to combat stress. So making it a ritual, doing that for yourself is going to help you, sort of stock your well-being before the stress comes at you. We have like 60,000 thoughts a day. So the one thing that I always say about meditation is, if you do it and you get used to it, you start to recognize that it feels like a tall, cool glass of water. It is that refreshing, and can really set you up to be able to mitigate the stress of the day more than you know. So a little bit about caregivers, and in general, my thoughts around this come from the little girl that cared for her mother, the teenage girl that cared for her mother, and the adult woman that cared for her mother. It's very easy to get sucked into everyone else's needs but your own. The one thing I want to say is that in order to be effective with caring for the people that we love and the people that we care for, we have to care for ourselves. It is the oxygen mask example. You cannot help anyone near you, around you, that you love and care for if you don't put the mask on yourself. There is no amount of depleting you in service of them that's going to make the situation better. So I encourage you to have those non-negotiables. What am I going to do for me to fill my bucket so I get to show up for myself and for those who are counting on me? And so I say that because, there were times when I would do anything to help my mom, at the point where I wasn't sleeping. When she wasn't sleeping, I wasn't sleeping. And then I would not be able to function myself, let alone support her. So you really got to make yourself a priority and have non-negotiable things that you do for you to preserve your health. And then just a word about compassion for people who maybe have someone who they're caring for in their home who might have a mental illness. I learned years after my mom had passed away, I learned to not look at the situation only from the lens of the one being impacted. So when you're in it and you have a loved one with a mental illness, like a family member, they say that when one family member is sick, the whole family is sick with them, right? They experience the whole thing. They're all affected, in other words. I was always acutely focused on the impact my mom was having on me, because that's what was present for me. As a little girl, that's all I saw. But it wasn't until I got older and went through therapy and started to realize that I needed to extend a little bit more compassion to my mom. And the way I could do that was separate my mother from her illness, because I could hate the illness and I could love my mother. And in doing that, I could find a little bit of compassion to understand that she was doing the best she could with the mental illness and trying to raise a daughter. So sometimes it's hard to not look at the impact it's having on you. But I will tell you that if you can step back and try to put yourself in their shoes and how hard life might be for them, how dark it might be for them, it could help. Compassion can go a long way if we just sort of step outside of ourselves and what we're experiencing. So my challenge for you today is quite simple, but yet it's a challenge. It's real. First and foremost, make it a priority to become present with how you're doing every day. Like, don't step over it. Don't ignore it. Don't busy yourself where you're not getting present to how you're doing and how you're feeling. Make it a priority. Support yourself. Know what your go-to strategies are. What's in your self-care toolbox? Are you going to adopt a practice that sort of strengthens you going into your day? Are you going to do some type of like exercise or meditation or gratitude practice that's going to strengthen you to go into your day? Or are you just going to know what's my go-to when I start to feel depleted and tired? Am I going to like make sure that, I have something that I can go do, that I can break away and go do something for me? Just know what that is so that when you're not feeling well, you can go and do that. And then support one another. Never assume the people around you are okay. We walk around, so many people walk around with a mask on that they're okay when they're struggling. So I always say, check in on those around you and don't assume that they're fine, because you might be the only person checking on them and they might be grateful that someone thought enough to ask. And then find the courage to go first. Normalize this whole conversation around mental health. Normalize it by going first. Lead by example. People and children are watching. I can't say that enough. And when I say go first, I'm not necessarily saying bear your personal mental health story. I'm saying initiate a conversation about a celebrity or an athlete who is publicly talking about what they're dealing with, because that can create a ripple effect. So find the courage to go first means you can actually have a bigger difference in reducing the stigma and creating a normal conversation around the brain. Remember, it's okay to not be okay. We don't have to be bulletproof. Like, we are human beings having a human experience and life comes at us. So give yourself the permission and the grace to not be okay sometimes. It's okay. Together, we can actually cause more of a ripple effect around stigma. And I believe that you plus me equals a much, much better world. And then finally, just one last thought I want to mention to you is our children. People say to me all the time, they say, Michelle, this is great for me as an adult, but I'm so worried about my children. How do I help my children? And my message to them is always this: model good mental health hygiene. Talk about how you're doing. Talk about what you do when you don't feel good. Talk about emotions, feelings. Get that to be a normal conversation at home so that your kids will talk to you when they're not feeling well. Institute practices that you know are going to help you and share them with your kids. Kids listen, but they also watch everything that we're doing. So my goal in 2022 is to reach 10,000 people with my work, my messages, my resilience coaching, and my programs. If you will share me, I would love that. And stay connected to me. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle. I know a lot of times on these webinars, it's really hard to get people to talk. So if you would like to come off mute or would like to, post something in the chat, we can certainly read it out loud. But I'd like to kind of challenge us to take, the next 15 to 20 minutes to talk about some of the things that Michelle said and how can we incorporate that into our daily lives, into our workplace. Knowing that this career that everybody's in, you are on stage, the whole time you're there. And it's hard to come in to work when you're not feeling good and your well isn't full, so to speak, and then to have to support others. So, and to kind of be on stage, as I like to call it. So, I'd like to kind of challenge, some of y'all to come off mute and to maybe talk about your challenges or ask Michelle a question, or if you're not comfortable, put it in chat. Or if people aren't comfortable, asking questions or saying what they're struggling with, is there anything anybody's doing that is really working? It's kind of, there we go. Yay. All right, can you see this, Michelle?
Yeah. What tips do you recommend for accountability? Oh, okay. So like accountability, accountability buddies are great. I have friends who hold me accountable. A buddy who's in it with you is always better, right? Like, did you meditate today? Yes. Did you meditate? Well, sort of. What do you mean sort of, So buddies are good. Honestly, if I want something to get done in my routine, I block it on my calendar and I make it happen. And I think you also have to realize the payoff. Like, if you do something consistently for a week or 10 days, you're building a habit that you absolutely have to do. So if you think about the futuristic, the end result of, say, taking on a meditation practice or gratitude practice every day, it's in 2 weeks, that's going to become your new norm. And the feeling you get, I always say this to people, like the feeling you get after meditation, like I want you to get addicted to that, because that's the good stuff, right? And so once you start to do it over and over and start feeling that, you're going to be like, I have to do that because that's my respite. That feels good for me. So I think discipline at first, but before it becomes a habit, and then accountability buddy. Yeah, very important to check on other people. Absolutely.
I want to talk about that for just a minute and kind of think through that, because I know, we talk about the norms and we talk about how it is okay to not be okay, but is it? Like, we know it is, but is it really? Because so often people will either not ask if somebody's okay because they either don't know how to respond if they're not, or like, I know sometimes I'm guilty of saying, I don't want to say that I'm not okay, because then somebody will have pity on me. And that's the very last thing I need. Right.
Yeah.
Like, so it's the language and how, talking about how we all change our language and how we model that behavior for our coworkers, for our families, for our patients and clients that we're supporting. But, have you done anything with that, Michelle, to kind of think about what language you use and how we can change that norm?
Yeah, I like what you said at first, like you're almost like hesitant to ask because you're like, oh gosh, like that's going to fall on me to fix. Like, I think we have to recognize the power of just listening and the power of our generous listening. I think, if we remember that we're not here to fix it, we're just here to just sort of be a support, it takes the pressure off. So just checking in on someone and not taking it on that you have to resolve everything. You could just be the ears that they needed to listen to them. That could be the greatest gift as they talk through it. Don't take it on that you feel like you have to fix it so that you avoid engaging. Like engage and listen and just be present. And that could be more than they've gotten from anyone at home or anyone else. So I always tell people, you know, take a step back from that. Just understand our humanness wants to connect us with other people, but then the fixer in us wants to fix it. So try not to, feel like you have to fix it. Just be there. Oh, wow. Heartache, yes.
You may want to read it out loud. I'm not sure everybody's looking at chat.
Okay, yeah, Michelle, I too grew up with a mom with bipolar disorder, and she was not diagnosed for many years. It created a lot of heartache growing up. Yep. And even as an adult, I struggle with the impact it left on me during childhood. I do think I would like to see more organizations and companies being more comfortable with talking about what their employees' feelings and experiences. I think it affects individual capacity building productivity much more. Yep. I'm thankful my employer is extremely understanding and open, but not everyone has the same access. Like if I get overwhelmed with a project, I can tell my supervisor she's willing to help me through it and even take a task off my plate. That's wonderful. That's a wonderful environment. Absolutely. I think we need more environments like that in general, where leaders understand their employees are people first, complex human beings with experiences behind them. And I couldn't agree more. And I think, that's really what fuels me to want to make more of a difference within organizations, because so many people spend so many hours at work. Like these environments need to be where people can bring their whole selves to work, because we're not able to compartmentalize things and leave, our emotional stuff at home, our what we're struggling with. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I feel for you. I talk about, I also talk about the fact that we all have stuff in our past, right? Like this lady and myself have a bipolar parent in our past, but everyone has some type of trauma or experience that has shaped them or scarred them. And I've come to learn that that's what happened, and that doesn't dictate who I am in the future. I get to write the script of how I live my life from this moment forward. So I just invite people who can see what they've been through to consider that that's not where they're going. That's where they were.
So Michelle, what about burnout and resiliency and self-care? Can you talk a little bit about that path?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when we think about burnout is like the ultimate expense we pay for not taking care of ourselves, right? And it's putting everything else, it's putting work and life ahead of our well-being. And it's the result of neglecting our emotional well-being and our health in general. And that's why it's so important for us to remember that we have more control than we think. I have to tell you, I wake up in the morning sometimes and I'm struggling. I'm like really struggling. I'm thinking about a lot of negative things. But you have to remember that your thoughts create a feeling, and your feeling creates an action or an inaction. So, we have to reclaim what we have control over. We have to reclaim that I can choose to ride the negative thought, or I can choose to ride the positive thought. I can choose to exercise my body and feel good, because I know if I feel good, I can deal with things better, or not. I think we all have to recognize that no job is worth our health. And we all have to recognize that what's really at stake in not taking care of ourselves is not being able to be there for those that we love, and for our dreams and our goals in our own life. So, it really is about having unrelenting standards in terms of the boundaries and the, non-negotiable habits that you're going to adopt, those non-negotiable time that you're going to give to yourself every day. and not allowing anyone to hijack that, and really protecting that, and protecting your mind from things like the news, and protecting your mind from negativity. Like only we can protect that. Only we can create the discipline to do what we need to feel good and to make ourselves and our health a priority.
Yeah, I was thinking as you were saying that about, you know, as I'm a pediatric nurse, for those of you who don't know. I'm not a child life specialist, but let me put myself in your shoes for a minute. You walk into a room, and how nice would it be if a child was very honest and said, I am scared of X, right? But so many times that's not what they do. Or I am fearful of this, or I am sad, or, if everybody could just come up with that language and say it, then we could all deal with it better. So when we think about us as adults, there's no quick fix, right? There's no this turnkey self-care. If I sit and I'm mindful and I color, or I sit and I'm, I exercise, or any of these things that we do that are so good for us, that doesn't work if we don't take time to feel and identify what our feelings are, right? So it's the same thing we're doing with our patients, right? Like we are working with them through play and looking at their social situation and looking at their medical situation and helping to identify what their feelings are, to give them coping mechanisms to do that are on a growth and development level, right? So we need to do that with ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I mean, that's exactly the truth right there. It's like being able to, and that's the whole conversation around self-awareness that I mentioned. Like we have to make it a practice to get present to how we're doing, how we're feeling. If we can get present to it, then we can, then the challenge would be articulate it to someone, right? But the first step is you got to get present to it. And then someone you love and trust and you can confide and you can talk to. But the first step is really not stepping over it and not pretending it's not there or redirecting your attention someplace else, I think it all comes back to self-awareness. It really does.
Yeah, I know.
Michelle, you mentioned something about how I think at your pharmaceutical company, you launched or you advocated for an ERG on mental health.
Yeah.
Can you kind of expound on that a little bit in terms of like, what is an ERG? How did you form the group? What did you guys do? I'm curious about that because I hadn't heard of that before.
Yeah. So, in bigger companies, there's the luxury of having what we used to call affinity groups, like for different ethnicities, or like we had one for women in leadership, and there was one for the Hispanic population, African American, all the different affinity groups. But what they realized was the power of those groups to bring people together, to support one another, to have shared experiences that they can sort of lean on one another. The same thing was necessary for people who had dealt with invisible challenges, like whether they suffered from a mental illness or they had someone at home they were caring for. It was those two primary populations. So we advocated to have a group because we knew that this was the one area that crossed over all demographics, right? Like if anyone, like everyone is affected by mental illness. So imagine if we could create a group that could bring people together. So we really just it was like build it and they will come. It was like we got leadership support to create the framework, which was really, it was going to be a community. We were going to get people together, once a quarter, once a month, have little, virtual meetings in between, and then we get together like once a month in person as a place for people to go and get support and share, like, well, what did you do when your loved one had this, or what did you do, or wow, you got through depression, wow. Because the power of seeing someone navigate that and come out the other side is pure hope. And you want to create those examples of hope for people who maybe don't have it. So we just got the support, we publicized it, and people volunteered people showed up, people wanted to be part of the group and contributed and shared. And it became a very safe space for people to talk about what they were dealing with, and also be connected to resources the company was providing that maybe they didn't even know existed. So yeah, it was amazing idea. I recommend ERGs all day long to organizations to help them.
That's awesome. I'm curious if anyone in the group at other hospitals, like, do you guys have ERGs or affinity groups focused on mental health? And is your leadership supportive of that? I'm interested in that. I think that's awesome. And yeah, for sure, highlighting, what resources your company is already trying to do that maybe people don't know is a resource or available to them.
Right. Alexis has a question. If you wanted to implement one, how would you recommend going about it? I'm happy to talk to you about this, Alexis, because I have like this whole, I have a couple different websites, and on one of my websites, I actually have different ways you can go about building an ERG. It's not hard. The biggest thing you need is your leadership's buy-in and a vision and a goal. It's really about getting your leadership to say, this is important. We want to create a space that brings people together to support one another. It really is a tremendous asset to the business, to the organization, because you're harnessing your own people to support your own people. But I can definitely, I can talk to you about how to go about doing that in detail. It's not that hard at all. Any other questions or comments or thoughts or feedback? Feel free to connect with me if you have questions you want to talk about offline. I'm more than happy to connect and share and talk and share whatever I can do to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michelle. I'm not sure where Dee Dee went, but we really appreciate everyone for attending and kind of sharing their thoughts and hearing your story. And I will be emailing out our post survey so that you guys can fill out the survey and you'll get your PDU certificate. I'll also send over Michelle's information so that if you have any other follow-up questions or you're interested in resilience coaching, you can reach out to her. And also the recording of this webinar today for any of your colleagues or coworkers who may be interested in watching if they weren't able to attend today. So thank you so much again, Michelle. I'm going to end the recording now, and I appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Your vulnerability.